I love this idea, and I've used this before on different podcasts at different times, but the idea that how does poison become medicine, right? So imagine either, like the snake bite, the antivenom, right? They actually extract the venom out of the creature, whether it be, the scorpion or the rattlesnake or whatever. They extract the venom out of them to make antivenom, right? And the same version of that is what an inoculation is, right? So imagine, like getting a flu shot, right? Like a lot of people get flu shots every year. And what are you doing? Each time you get an inoculation, you're getting like a little bit of the poison, right? So they're putting a little bit of the flu in you in just that small little amount so that your body and your white blood cells, say, oh, there's the enemy. Let me go attack that. Let me figure out, so that the next time your kids are in school or you're in the grocery store and somebody sneezes in line and they have the flu and they've now just put it on you, right? But your body says, oh, that looks a lot like, that little thing that I had that we killed off when it was small, right? That's why you get a little low grade fever once you get a flu shot, typically, because your body is raising its core body temperature to fight off that little bit of poison that's in your body, right? And then the same thing when you get sneezed on in line at the grocery store, your body says, oh, that looks like the real thing, but we're already trained to go fight that, right? And so your body takes action and goes and fights off that real, flu strain that you just got a little bit of. And so I love that analogy of poison can equal medicine. And then the modern day version of this are like Spartan races, right? Or Tough Mudders, when people go out for quote unquote fun, right? And I've done these, and I know you've done these, right? Where you go out for quote unquote fun and you overcome obstacles, right? You have to dunk your head under muddy water and you have to pull yourself up rope and swing and, carry heavy stuff, right? It's running, it's jumping, it's overcoming, right? And they've literally made a sport out of overcoming obstacles. And I mean, that's a great analogy of looking at obstacles in that kind of Tough Mudder, Spartan kind of way and saying, yes, I could actually look at obstacles as fun to overcome.
The way you just framed it, there's a couple of different ways I want to go, and I got to decide because they're kind of two tangents. But I'll go with my passion. It reminds me of the Legend of Zelda. And I've talked to you, you've heard me talk about this, and I'll just kind of do the condensed version. But I grew up playing the Legend of Zelda, the OG original Nintendo Entertainment System, like Pixel one. And the thing that I loved about that game is it dropped you into this world with nothing, and you had to explore. And you could literally miss the first power up that gives you a sword that gets you on your journey. And if you do that, you'll struggle, but eventually you'll learn to be like, okay, wait, let me start this over. And you find the cave where you get the sword and you start your journey. So that's the point, is you start your journey, you're dropped in the middle of nowhere. You find the cave, you go into that cave, and old man gives you a sword. He says, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this. So you kind of have your first, okay, so you're dropped in this world. Now you can just explore this world and just, slay enemies and have fun. And get a couple of power-ups and get a little bit stronger. But if you really want to level up, if you really want to get stronger, you got to go into the dungeons. And, the dungeons is where the real enemies are. That's where it gets harder. But if you are able to overcome that dungeon, then you get not only a power-up that gives you strength to overcome further obstacles, but you also get a piece of heart, which gives you more energy to actually, I think of it as like endurance. So this analogy, and it plays out over and over in every series of this game, is you're basically saying, hey, I can just spend my time with the abilities that I have exploring this world, or I can go and explore these dungeons, get powered up, and then go further. And that's really what the obstacle is, the way, like, that's when it clicked for me, when I realized, oh, it's like video games. Because for me, I love that challenge. I love going after the hardest challenge. I want to not only beat the game, I want to then restart the game in hero mode. Hero mode is when everything is harder. So that, and that's the attitude that I take into business, into my health, into spending time with my family. Like, I could choose to just go surface level in these conversations with my kids, or I can, explore some dungeons and talk
Mm,
about some things that are harder to talk about.
mm.
So I'll kind of leave it there and see what you think.
Well, a couple of things. So you mentioned the dungeons, right? Which are, it seems to me to be this metaphor for, going into the scary place, right? A dungeon is dark and you got to go, like down into it. And that's a lot what life can be like, right? When you're exploring something that seems overwhelming or dark, or, there's a lot of adjectives you could use for something that's a challenge, right? And so I think the dungeon is a wonderful metaphor. And I love that term. I don't know if I've ever heard that term before, the hero mode. But that sounds like a fun way to be living life right there, Hugo. Going through at it in hero mode.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the other tangent that I wanted to take was when you talked about inoculation and the flu shot, and it kind of is on that same wavelength, but thinking to yourself, in the situation of the flu shot, you're not inoculating yourself with a full dose of like whatever it is. You're not saying, hey, sneeze on me so I don't get sick next time. I mean, some people do, and that kind of works. But the best approach is to say, how can we give you just enough so it makes you sweat, like you said, right? Like it heats you up, makes you sweat. That way, next time when the real challenge is up, you know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, I'll kind of transition into, how do you use the obstacles to level yourself up, right? Those two premises of giving yourself the right amount of dose and then also like going into the challenge because you want to be stronger. How do you set yourself up to succeed and to be able to overcome bigger and bigger obstacles?
Well, that is a pretty good segue for me into the how part, right? Like how do we go about this? So I'll just give you my, it's not my 3-part prescription. I mean, this is actually right out of the obstacle is the way, but so Ryan Holiday talks a lot about perception, action, and will, right? And so your perception is, what is it, when let's go back to your dungeon metaphor, right? So when you're faced with the dungeon, right, you either got to open the scary door to get there, or you got to take that first flight of stairs down there. But your perception is, what am I facing, right? And I think a lot of times what people do is, I mean, this is human nature, right? Because your natural proclivity is trying to keep you in comfort zone, and going into the dungeon or facing obstacles is the opposite of that, right? So it's human nature to want to resist that. But if your perception, where I was going to go with that is, if what your mind will tend to do is try to trick you and tell you it's going to be worse than it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because let's go back to the analogy I was using before about graduating school or any of this other stuff. Like when you've just graduated high school and you're getting ready to go into college, when you become a freshman and you show up your first week, I mean, it's kind of probably going to be one of the hardest times that you've ever faced, because it's all new. It's a new place. It's a new people. It's new teachers, professors. It's, this whole other level, right? And not to say that there aren't other hard times when you're studying for the midterm or, in a group project and there's multiple difficulties. But when you've graduated, like a week after you've graduated college, and now you look back across that 4-year degree and you think like, wow, yes, it was difficult, but I got through it. And there was nothing so daunting, right, as you imagine, like the week before you showed up at college, like it was going to be this unsurmountable thing. And that's what perspective gives you, right? Perspective on the other side. That's why we're trying to go back to the other analogy of the poison equals the inoculation, right? It seems like it's going to be way worse before you get into it. That's why using our perception to gauge, I'm mixing metaphors here, but to go back to the dungeon, right? Like, do I have the ability to go into the dungeon with my kids or however that plays out and navigate this? And my whole point about the college is, if you go back and take apart situations that you've already had in your life, you've already done these things. This is just another example of how to do the thing. And then number 2 on the list is action, right? That's opening up the door on the dungeon. That is taking the steps down there, right? That is, we talk about this all the time in our Team 212 program, the action. Marcus Aurelius said that in that quote, right? The impediment to action becomes the way, right? So it seems like in life, if you're going to get physically fit, you need to get out there and get to work, right? It seems like in personal development, if you're going to improve your skills and your knowledge, you're going to have to read a book. You're going to have to go to a seminar. You're going to have to listen to some audios. You're going to have to join Team 212. You're going to have to do some things. You're going to have to take action, right? So it seems like in life, if you want positive things to occur for you, there should be a goodly amount of action.